Hello and happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Horizon Podcast. I'm Jason, your host. We're looking at how the news of today affects your tomorrow. First up, it's one of the show's favorite subjects, Mr. Donald J. Trump. Once again in the news for some questionable decision making around the Comey firing. Now, in my opinion, I think that there's definitely still a lot of stuff that is unclear. I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that the fact that you can't get everyone on the same page, in my mind, doesn't really make any sense because if it was a very straightforward answer, it would be this is what happened. But the fact that it changes, the fact that people can't really understand what happened, what didn't. I mean, you could also make the argument that yes, it happens in criminal cases, but I mean, I think that's a little bit different because how people can perceive something is different. But when you have something like this that should be very structured and the decision like it very clear, the entire team should be able to say, this is why he was fired, this is what we think went wrong, and this is what we'd like to see fixed in the future. But, that does not seem possible, which brings us to where we're at right now. I think it's time to have a put up or shut up solution. I think there has to be some sort of independent investigation at this point because either his team still believes there's something went wrong fishing in the election. Democrats are obviously upset that they think that there's Russian involvement. So I think that they need to both come in with, again, this put up or shut up solution. What Trump benefits from an investigation is being able to answer two things. One, what did the Obama administration do or the involvement in terms of the unmasking situation? Was it something they were involved in? Was it something they were inadvertent? Were they, feeding information to Hillary Clinton's campaign? And the second, too, is what was actually the more non-classified information around the email scandal. I think figure out exactly what he wants answered, and it can't just be okay. She was bad and she was evil. I think it needs to be something tangible. This is what we are seeking information or clarification on. And so his situation is if he loses, should be that number one, he fires anyone who has these Russian affiliations, and number two, that he should release his tax returns. Now, for the Democrats, what they want is obviously an investigation into these alleged Russian ties. Now, I think that one thing that's going to be very interesting too and to explore is that how can you, on one hand, talk about the democracy being very important, but yet clearly have favored one candidate over the other, regardless of where the information came from. Now, let's assume that a lot of these stories that were put out were quote unquote fake news and exploring the role that that played. Well, let's figure out what that happened. What specifically swayed people that was not true? I mean, you can't just say that it's fake news if, it's John Podesta putting out reports of, hey, we're screwing Bernie Sanders, or other people in news organizations who are essentially saying, "Oh, look at me! I'm going after him. I'm going after Trump. Going after Sanders. Aren't we so great? Like, give me that inside scoop when you get in the White House." That to me is just horrendous. And so I think that in their terms, if they lose, I think it clearly has to be having term limits put in. The fact that you just have these people who are permanent fixtures of Washington, in my mind, makes no sense because they have no incentive at all to change things. So I think that having a potential opportunity for them to prove their case, but also too having something that says, look, if you lose, we're going to crucify you. I think that also having something of a debt clock of sorts, and again, this may be hard to calculate, but what is the running cost of this investigation? And I think too, whatever side comes out on top should hammer the other side of like, look what you caused, like look at the amount of money that was wasted, and be a very tangible and public thing so that the public is kept up to date. I think that in traditional investigations or traditional situations that yes, a lot of this ideally would probably be done behind closed doors. But I think we're at such a point now that if this is not a very transparent process and there's stuff that normally would not be disclosed that is disclosed, I think that people are always going to have doubts. And they're always probably, regardless, will have doubts. But at least the majority of people say, okay, here is the actual facts. Here is what the information that I've been given. And it's not, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Senator, I can't talk about that now. I just don't think that that really makes sense. Next, moving on to the markets. This has been a terrible week for retail. As many of you as watchers of this podcast probably guess, I mean, we do a lot of shopping online, and I think that a lot of traditional retailers, whether it's Macy's, JCPenney, even Target, have really still struggled with that transition, and Amazon just eating everyone's lunch. And I think that's true because Amazon is able to be digital first and then maybe now try to deliver improved in-person experiences. But traditional retailers, they're still delivering the same, for lack of a word, terrible in-person experience and now delivering a mediocre online experience. And so you're continually seeing them kind of on this slippery slope downwards of just not really having a clear idea of how to move forward. And I don't see it changing. I mean, I think it's very evident the fact that, in my opinion, someone who, was a teenager in the 80s, went to a mall, and then for whatever reason had gone abroad or, went to Mars and came back here 30 plus years later, that they would still be perfectly fine in a mall. Not much has really changed. There's not really that much better of an experience. It really just feels a lot of the same. And I think that one of the biggest opportunities that I thought that these places would pursue was something with augmented reality to make it more obvious, what clothes look like, being able to do stuff in a more on-demand fashion. But the fact that the layout of so many of these stores just feels like the same antiquated model where you just have so much stuff that I'm sure it's very hard to get full store turnover. But it's no wonder that they're struggling, but they don't seem to really have an idea of how to fix it. And I don't know if whether they need a chief innovation officer. I don't know if they just need to throw out their entire strategy and start over. But it clearly something is not working, and they need to acknowledge that and say this is what we're going to do different. Otherwise, I just think shareholders are continually going to bail and bail and bail to the point of, I mean, probably your options are going to be Amazon and then a bunch of smaller retailers that people say, okay, this is my niche. So it'll be interesting to see where that direction goes. Moving on to tech, obviously the big story this week is Snapchat, which a lot of investors are calling Snap Crackle Drop. And I mean, I don't know why there was such a huge shock here. I still don't understand how Snap is going to compete against Facebook or compete going forward. I think that that's the biggest misunderstanding that particularly a lot of older investors have about this company is that it has a group of people who use it. Yes. But of those people that use it, they're not really bringing that many more people on. And B, most of the people who are interested in advertise or would be on there, they're not interested in advertising. They're looking away. They're not, engaged with that. And so I think you're going to see the same problem that Yelp also had, where you just don't see these advertisers renew their engagements. And so it's very hard to see how they reach $1 billion in revenue this year, and it's also very hard to see where do they go from here. And it's very cool and all to say, oh, we're a quote unquote camera company, but I mean, look at Eastman Kodak. They were supposed to be massive and never going away, and then they had a great year and then gone. And I don't necessarily know if that will happen to Snapchat. I think Snapchat could just sort of always be around, but to be super arrogant and make a comparison between yourselves with Facebook and Yahoo and Google just doesn't make any sense, because with a search engine, you just choose which has a better experience and delivers better results. And so naturally, for most people, Google became a verb and Google delivered that better experience over Yahoo. However, with Facebook and Snapchat, there's a much higher switching cost. If all your friends are on Instagram and they're sharing their stories there, and that's who your community is, you're not going to switch to the next greatest thing, no matter how good it is, because all your friends are still there. It's the same problem that WeChat, China's massive internet company and network messaging platform, has had expanding, is that sure, it's probably great, it's probably cool, and a bunch of Chinese people don't understand why the rest of the world doesn't use it, but it's for the reason that none of their friends are on it, so why would they be on it? And I think that just creates a huge misalignment. Arrogance is that if you just view, oh, we're better, and people understand that we're better, and that's it. I mean, I really struggle to see how they keep growing if they're just going to say, oh, we're going to make more filters, or maybe do some stuff with augmented reality. And it's just hard to see where it goes from here. And I think that they do have a little bit of leeway for probably the next 3 quarters, but a year post them going public in next March, it's going to be very hard for people to stick around on that ship and hope that something better is going to happen. So that's all we got for today. Keep it tuned here to Horizon Podcast, and we'll keep you informed about how the news of today affects your tomorrow. Have a good weekend.